You know that moment when your entire world shifts and you realize that the person you trusted most was slowly trying to kill you? Yeah, that happened to me 3 months ago. And the worst part? She almost killed her own father instead. But let me start from the beginning, because this story will make you question every gift you've ever received from family. It was a Tuesday in March when everything started. I remember because Tuesday was always my favorite day of the week. Quiet, predictable, no expectations. I was in my kitchen at exactly 6:47 a.m., the same time I'd been making coffee for the past 32 years. The morning light was streaming through the yellow curtains my mother-in-law had given us as a wedding present, casting everything in this warm golden glow. I could hear the neighbor's dog barking at the mailman, the familiar rumble of Tom's truck starting up 3 houses down, and the gentle hum of our old refrigerator that Richard kept threatening to replace. Everything was exactly as it should be. That's when the doorbell rang. Now, nobody rings doorbells at 6:47 a.m. unless someone's dead or dying. So my heart did this little skip-jump thing it does when something's wrong. I padded to the front door in my fuzzy slippers, the pink ones with the worn-out soles that I refused to throw away, and peered through the peephole. It was Elena, my daughter-in-law. She was standing there with this perfectly wrapped box in her hands, wearing that smile she always wore when she wanted something. You know the one. Too bright, too wide, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. Her dark hair was pulled back in one of those complicated braids that must take 45 minutes to do. Not a strand out of place, even at this ungodly hour. "Elena!" I opened the door, suddenly aware that I was still in my bathrobe. "Honey, what are you doing here so early?" "Happy early birthday, Mom," she said, practically bouncing on her toes. She held out the box like she was presenting the crown jewels. "I know your birthday isn't until Thursday, but I just couldn't wait to give this to you." The box was beautiful, I'll give her that, wrapped in this expensive-looking burgundy paper with a gold ribbon that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. It felt heavy in my hands, substantial, like something important. "Elena, you didn't need to open it," she interrupted, clapping her hands together. "I picked it out specially for you. I just know you're going to love it." I should mention that Elena and I had what you might call a complicated relationship. She'd been married to my son David for 4 years, and in those 4 years, I could count on one hand the number of times she'd given me a gift that wasn't obligatory. Christmas, maybe Mother's Day if David reminded her, but never just because. So this was weird. I unwrapped the box carefully, saving the ribbon like my mother taught me. Inside, nestled in white tissue paper, was a bottle of wine. Not just any wine. This was the kind you see in fancy restaurants, the kind with a label in what looked like French or Italian, with gold lettering and everything. "Elena, this is too expensive," I said, turning the bottle over in my hands. The glass was thick and heavy, cold against my palms. "You shouldn't have spent this much money." "Nothing's too expensive for my favorite mother-in-law," she said with a laugh. But here's the thing. I was her only mother-in-law. It was one of those jokes that wasn't really funny, but you smile anyway, because you don't want to start anything. "The woman at the wine shop said it's perfect for special occasions," Elena continued, stepping closer. "She said it has notes of cherry and, oh, what was it? Blackcurrant, I think. And something about oak aging." I nodded like I knew what any of that meant. Richard and I weren't wine people. We were beer people, occasionally whiskey people on New Year's Eve. But wine always seemed too fancy for our kitchen table. "You'll have to save it for something really special," she said, her eyes bright and focused on the bottle in my hands. "Promise me you won't just drink it with dinner one random night. This is celebration wine." "Of course," I said, though honestly, I was already wondering if I'd ever have an occasion special enough for such an expensive bottle. "Thank you, sweetheart. This is so thoughtful." She stayed for coffee after that, which was also unusual. Normally, Elena was all business. Quick hellos, quicker goodbyes, always somewhere else she needed to be. But that morning she lingered at my kitchen table, asking about my plans for my actual birthday. commenting on how good the coffee smelled, even complimenting my bathrobe. "You know what?" she said suddenly, snapping her fingers. "You should have a dinner party. Invite everyone over for your birthday. Make it a real celebration." "Oh, I don't know," I said, refilling her cup. "Richard and I usually just do something quiet. But this is your 60th. It's a milestone." She leaned forward, her eyes bright with what looked like genuine excitement. "Come on, Mom. You deserve a real party. Invite David and me, maybe some other family members, make a whole thing of it." The idea was actually kind of appealing. We hadn't had people over in months, and our dining room table always looked so lonely with just 2 place settings. "And that wine," Elena said, pointing toward the counter where I'd set the bottle, "would be perfect for the occasion. Imagine how impressed everyone would be when you bring out a bottle like that." "You really think so?" "I know so." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her fingers were cold, I noticed. Always cold. "Trust me on this one, Mom. It'll be perfect." And you know what? I believed her. I started planning the dinner party right then and there, thinking about what I'd cook, how I'd set the table, imagining the looks on everyone's faces when I served that beautiful wine. God, I was so naive. 2 days later, Thursday evening, our little dining room was fuller than it had been in years. I'd spent the entire day cooking, my famous pot roast, garlic mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and a chocolate cake I'd made from scratch. The house smelled like Sunday dinner at my grandmother's house, warm and welcoming and safe. Richard had pulled out the good china, the set we'd gotten for our wedding and barely used since. The plates had this delicate blue flower pattern that always made me feel fancy, like we were people who had dinner parties all the time. David arrived first with Elena, carrying a bouquet of flowers that were probably also too expensive. My son looked good. He'd been working out lately, and his face had filled out in a way that made him look more like his father every day. Elena was wearing this black dress that probably cost more than my car payment, her hair done in perfect waves that cascaded over one shoulder. "Something smells incredible," David said, kissing my cheek. He smelled like the cologne I'd bought him for Christmas mixed with something else, something sharp and chemical that I couldn't quite place. "Your mother's been cooking all day," Richard said, emerging from the kitchen with a dish rag thrown over his shoulder. "I've been banned from my own kitchen since noon." Everyone laughed, but it felt forced somehow, like we were all trying too hard to have a good time. Richard's sister Margaret arrived with her husband Carl 20 minutes later, carrying a store-bought pie that she tried to pass off as homemade. I appreciated the gesture, even if the aluminum tin was still visible under the saran wrap. The surprise guest of the evening was Elena's father, Miguel. He'd stopped by unexpectedly around 7, just as we were sitting down to dinner. "I was in the neighborhood," he'd said, standing in our doorway with that same charming smile that Elena had inherited. "I hope you don't mind an old man crashing the party." Miguel was one of those people who lit up a room just by walking into it. 72 years old, silver-haired, with these kind brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He was recently widowed. Elena's mother had passed 2 years ago from cancer, and Elena had been worried about him being lonely. "Dad," Elena had said when she saw him, jumping up from her seat. But there was something strange in her voice. Not happiness at seeing her father, but something that sounded almost like panic. "Mija," Miguel said, kissing Elena's cheek. "You didn't tell me you were having a party for your beautiful mother-in-law." It was last minute," Elena stammered. I quickly set another place at the table, delighted to have Miguel join us. He was always such good company, full of stories from his younger days, always ready with a compliment or a joke. Elena had gotten her charm from him, though in Miguel, it felt genuine rather than calculated. We sat down to dinner at exactly 7:15, the candles flickering in their holders, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Miguel regaled us with stories about his latest woodworking project. Richard talked about work. Margaret complained about their new neighbors who played music too loud. It was exactly the kind of evening I'd imagined when Elena first suggested the party. As we were finishing the main course, I remembered the wine. "Oh," I said, jumping up from my seat. I almost forgot the special wine Elena gave me for my birthday. I saw Elena's face drain of all color. She gripped her napkin so tightly her knuckles went white. "Actually, Mom," Elena said quickly, her voice strained, "maybe we should save that wine for another time. It's getting pretty late." "Nonsense," Richard said, already standing. "A bottle that fancy deserves to be enjoyed with the meal. Where'd you put it, honey?" "Kitchen counter, next to the coffee pot." I watched Richard disappear into the kitchen, heard him rummaging around. Elena looked like she was about to be sick. David was looking at his wife with growing concern. "Here we go," Richard said, returning with the wine and our good corkscrew. "This is some serious wine, Elena. You've got expensive taste." Elena opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Richard worked the cork out with the practiced ease of someone who'd opened plenty of bottles in his day. The wine made a soft pop sound as the cork came free. "Smells good," he said, holding the bottle up. "Real good." That's when Miguel spoke up. "What kind of wine is it?" "Italian Chianti," Richard said, showing him the label. 2019, fancy stuff. Miguel's eyes lit up. "Ah, Chianti, my favorite. My late wife Rosa and I, we spent our honeymoon in Tuscany, you know. We must have tried 50 different Chiantis." "Really?" I said, delighted. "Well then, you'll have to tell us if this one is any good." "I would be honored," Miguel said with a bow of his head. That's when Elena shot up from her chair so fast she knocked over her water glass. "No," she said, loud enough that everyone turned to stare at her. "I mean, Dad, you don't need to." "Mija, what's wrong?" Miguel asked, looking genuinely concerned. You don't drink wine anymore, remember, because of your medication?" Miguel frowned. "What medication?" "Elena, I don't take any medication except vitamins." The silence that followed was deafening. Elena was standing there, water from her overturned glass dripping onto the floor, her face white as paper, looking like a deer caught in headlights. "Elena," I said slowly, "are you feeling all right?" I'm fine. I just think, maybe we shouldn't open the wine tonight. Maybe we should save it." "But we're celebrating," Miguel said with a laugh. "And this old man hasn't had good Chianti in years. Come on, mija, let your old father enjoy a glass of good wine." Elena looked like she was about to be sick. "Dad, please, don't." "Elena, what's gotten into you?" David asked. "It's just wine." Richard had already started pouring small amounts into everyone's glasses, including Miguel's. The deep red wine caught the candlelight like liquid rubies. "A toast," Richard said, raising his glass. "To my beautiful wife on her 60th birthday, and to unexpected guests who make the evening even more special." Everyone raised their glasses except Elena, who was still standing there with her hands pressed to her chest like she was having a heart attack. Miguel brought his glass to his lips. "Dad, no!" Elena lunged forward, knocking the glass out of her father's hand. It shattered on the floor, red wine splattering across our white tablecloth and Elena's black dress. Everyone stared in shock. "Elena!" David exclaimed. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Miguel looked hurt and confused. "Mija, why did you do that?" Elena was shaking now, tears streaming down her face. Because... She looked around the table at all of us staring at her, and something in her face just broke. "Because there's antifreeze in it," she whispered. The words hung in the air like poison themselves. "What?" I said, sure I hadn't heard her correctly. "There's antifreeze in the wine," Elena repeated louder this time. "Ethylene glycol. I put it there. I was trying to..." She looked at me with eyes full of anguish. "I was trying to kill you." The silence that followed Elena's confession was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the distant sound of a car driving past, the gentle hum of our refrigerator. Normal sounds from a world that had just shifted completely off its axis. Miguel was the first to speak. Mija, what are you saying? I'm saying I put poison in that wine, Elena said, her voice flat and hollow now, like all the emotion had drained out of her. I gave it to Mom for her birthday, hoping she would drink it, and... She couldn't finish the sentence. And what? David demanded, standing up from his chair. His face was flushed, his hands clenched into fists. Hoping she would what, Elena? Die, she whispered. I was hoping she would die. Richard dropped the wine bottle. It hit the floor with a crash, sending glass and poisoned wine across the dining room. The smell of alcohol mixed with something else, something chemical and wrong. Jesus Christ, Richard breathed. Miguel looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Elena, tell me you're joking. Tell me this is some kind of sick joke. It's not a joke, Dad. Elena was crying now, big heaving sobs that shook her whole body. I've been planning it for months. I researched how to do it, what kind of poison to use, how much would be enough. I spent weeks trying to work up the courage to actually go through with it. Why? The word came out of me like a croak. I was still sitting at the table, still holding my untouched glass of poisoned wine, trying to process what I was hearing. Elena, why would you want to kill me? Money, she said simply. David's inheritance, your life insurance, Richard's pension benefits. I calculated that it would be about $400,000 total. David made a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. Elena, what the fuck is wrong with you? We're drowning in debt, Elena shouted back at him. Credit cards, student loans, the mortgage on the house. Your salary isn't enough, and my job barely covers groceries. I've been terrified for months that we're going to lose everything. So you decided to murder my mother? I didn't want to. I spent weeks trying to think of another way, but there wasn't one. We needed that money, and this seemed like... She gestured helplessly at the shattered glass and spilled wine. It seemed like the only solution. Margaret and Carl were pressed back in their chairs like they were trying to disappear. Margaret's face was white with shock, and Carl looked like he might throw up. Elena, I said, surprised by how calm my own voice sounded. How exactly did you think this would work? Did you think I wouldn't get suspicious if I suddenly got sick? Ethylene glycol poisoning mimics other conditions, she said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. Kidney disease, liver failure, even just old age. People die from those things all the time. I thought it would look natural. Natural? Richard's voice was getting louder. You call poisoning someone natural? I thought she'd just get tired and then sicker and then... Elena shrugged helplessly. I thought it would be peaceful. I didn't want her to suffer. But you wanted her to die. I wanted the money, Elena screamed. I wanted us to have a future. I wanted to be able to pay our bills and buy nice things and not worry about money every single day. Miguel stood up slowly, his hands shaking. Mija, what have you become? Dad, I'm so sorry. When I saw you were here, when Mom said she wanted to serve the wine, I panicked. I couldn't let you drink it. I couldn't let you get hurt because of what I did. But you could let Barbara get hurt. Elena looked at me across the table, and for a moment I saw something that might have been genuine remorse in her eyes. I told myself it wasn't personal, she said quietly. I told myself that Barbara had lived a good life, that she'd had her time, and that David and I needed our chance now. It wasn't personal? I stood up slowly, feeling anger surge through me for the first time since this nightmare began. You tried to kill me, Elena. How is that not personal? Because it wasn't about you, it was about the money. The money was mine. My life was mine. I was shouting now, months of suppressed frustration and hurt pouring out. Everything you were trying to take belonged to me. Elena stared at me like she'd never seen me before, like she was just now realizing that I was a real person with real feelings and not just an obstacle to her financial security. David walked over to where Elena was standing and grabbed her by the shoulders. How long? He demanded. How long have you been planning to kill my mother? 3 months, she whispered. Since January. And you never thought to tell me that we were in financial trouble, I tried. I tried to talk to you about money, but you always changed the subject. You said not to worry about it, that things would work out, but they weren't working out, David. They were getting worse. So you decided to commit murder without consulting me? I was trying to protect you. I wanted you to inherit the money without having to feel guilty about it. If you didn't know what I'd done, you could enjoy the benefits without carrying the moral burden. David let go of her shoulders and stepped back like she was diseased. Elena, I don't even know who you are anymore. I'm your wife. I'm the woman who loves you enough to do anything to secure our future. Love? David laughed, but there was no humor in it. You call this love? You tried to murder my mother, Elena. You tried to take away the most important person in my life. To give us the life we deserve. We don't deserve anything that comes from killing innocent people. Elena turned to Miguel, desperate now. Dad, you understand, don't you? You and Mom struggled when I was young. You know what it's like to worry about money all the time. Miguel looked at his daughter with an expression of such profound disappointment that I felt sorry for her, despite everything she'd done. Mija, he said softly, your mother and I were poor sometimes. Yes, but we never ever considered hurting another person to solve our problems. But this was different. No. Miguel's voice was firm. This was not different. This was evil. And I don't know how my daughter became capable of evil. Elena crumpled then, falling back into a chair and sobbing like a child. The sound was heartbreaking and infuriating at the same time. What happens now? Margaret asked quietly. She and Carl were still pressed back in their chairs, looking like they wished they were anywhere else in the world. Now we call the police, Richard said, heading for the kitchen phone. No! Elena jumped up again. Please don't call the police. I'll turn myself in, I promise. Just give me time to think, to figure out how to tell David properly. Tell me properly? David stared at her in disbelief. Elena, you just confessed to attempted murder in front of 6 witnesses. There's no proper way to tell me that. I mean, I need time to explain why I did it, to help you understand that I was trying to help us. By killing my mother. By solving our financial problems. Elena, stop. I walked over to where she was standing, my heart pounding but my voice steady. You need to understand something. There is no explanation that will make this okay. There is no justification that will make David forgive you. You tried to kill me, and the only reason you're confessing is because you accidentally put your own father in danger. Elena looked at me with desperate eyes. Mom, please. I know I made a terrible mistake. Mistake? The word came out sharper than I intended. Elena, you spent 3 months planning my murder. You researched poisons. You bought antifreeze. You contaminated a bottle of wine, and you gave it to me with a smile. That's not a mistake. That's a crime. But I was desperate. Desperate people ask for help, Elena. They don't commit murder. Richard came back from the kitchen. Police are on their way, he announced. Elena's face went completely white. How long do I have? 5, maybe 10 minutes, Richard said. Enough time for you to explain to your father and your husband why you thought it was okay to try to poison an innocent woman. Elena turned to David one more time. David, please. You have to believe that I love you. Everything I did was because I love you. David looked at her for a long moment, and I could see the exact moment when whatever love he'd felt for her died in his eyes. Elena, he said quietly, if this is what your love looks like, I don't want it. After Miguel left, David, Richard, and I sat in our destroyed dining room staring at the broken glass and wine stains that told the story of how our family had been shattered in the space of 10 minutes. I can't believe this is happening, David said finally. He'd been sitting in silence for 20 minutes, just staring at the spot where Elena had knocked the glass from his grandfather's hand. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and this will all have been a nightmare. Elena tried to kill your mother, Richard said bluntly, and she almost killed Miguel instead. How could you not know something was wrong with her? I don't know, David said quietly. I knew she was stressed about money, but I thought it was normal stress. The kind everyone has. Normal people don't research how to poison their in-laws, I said, though my voice was gentler than Richard's. David, this isn't your fault. Isn't it? I'm her husband. I should have seen the signs. I should have known she was capable of this. I thought about Elena's confession, about how she'd spent months planning my death while sitting at our kitchen table, smiling and making small talk. What signs could there have been? I asked. She seemed completely normal to me. Difficult sometimes, maybe a little entitled, but not dangerous, not murderous. She's been different lately, David said slowly, like he was just now allowing himself to see what had been in front of him all along. More secretive, more calculating. She'd ask strange questions about your health, about our family finances, about things that seemed random at the time. What kinds of questions? About your life insurance policies, about what would happen to Dad's pension if something happened to you, about whether you had any health problems that ran in the family. David put his head in his hands. Jesus, she was researching how to make your murder look natural. Richard was pacing now, his hands clenched into fists. How long do you think she's been planning this? She said months, I replied, remembering Elena's desperate confession. She researched ethylene glycol specifically because it mimics natural causes of death. So she could have sat at your funeral, comforting us while we grieved, knowing she was the one who killed you. The thought made me feel sick. Elena in a black dress at my memorial service, holding David's hand while he cried for his murdered mother. The worst part, I said quietly, is that it almost worked. If Miguel hadn't been here tonight, if he hadn't been excited about the Chianti, I would have drunk that wine myself. And gotten sick gradually, David finished, and nobody would have suspected poison. Elena would have gotten away with the perfect murder. We spent the next hour cleaning up the dining room, throwing away the wine-stained tablecloth, sweeping up the glass from Miguel's shattered wine glass. But every time I looked at that dining room table, I saw Miguel raising the poisoned wine to his lips, saw Elena's desperate lunge to save her father's life. What happens now? David asked as we finished cleaning. Now we call the police, Richard said. The police are already involved, I pointed out. Elena confessed in front of 6 witnesses. There's no question about her guilt. I mean, what happens to us, to our family? David's voice cracked. Elena is going to go to prison. Miguel is going to have to live with the fact that his daughter tried to commit murder, and I don't know how I'm supposed to go on knowing that the woman I've been sharing a bed with for 4 years was planning to kill my mother. One day at a time, I said, though I honestly had no idea how any of us were going to get through this. I need to call a lawyer, David said suddenly. Elena's going to need representation, and I need to figure out what my obligations are as her husband. Your obligation is to yourself, Richard said firmly. You didn't do anything wrong here, David. You don't owe Elena anything. She's my wife. She tried to murder your mother. I know that, David's voice rose. Believe me, I know that, but I can't just pretend the last 4 years didn't happen. I can't just walk away from everything without thinking it through. I understood that. Love doesn't just disappear because someone betrays you. Love is stubborn and inconvenient and often completely irrational. Take some time, I said gently. You don't have to make any decisions tonight. What about Miguel? David asked. Someone should check on him. This is going to destroy him. I'll call him in the morning, I offered. Right now, I think he needs time to process what happened. After David left, Richard and I sat in our living room, both of us trying to make sense of the evening's events. I keep thinking about that moment when Elena lunged for the glass, Richard said. The panic on her face when she realized Miguel might drink the poisoned wine. She saved his life, after putting it in danger in the first place. But she chose to save him, even though it meant confessing to attempted murder. That has to count for something. Richard looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Barbara, she spent months planning to kill you. The only reason she confessed is because her plan backfired and put someone she actually cares about in danger. I know that. But in that moment when she had to choose between protecting herself and protecting her father, she chose her father. So maybe she's not completely evil. Maybe she's just broken, misguided, desperate. Barbara, you can't seriously be thinking about feeling sorry for her. I'm not feeling sorry for her. I'm trying to understand her. There's a difference. But even as I said it, I wondered if that was true. Elena had tried to kill me, had planned my slow and painful death for financial gain. Did it matter that she'd saved her father? Did it matter that she'd seemed genuinely remorseful when she confessed? Or was I just making excuses for someone who'd seen my life as expendable? The next morning, David called at 7 a.m. I could tell from his voice that he hadn't slept. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. How long do you think Elena has been planning this? I thought about Elena's confession the night before, about her admission that she'd researched the perfect poison. She said months, David, since she started researching inheritance laws and ethylene glycol poisoning. Months, David repeated like he was trying to process the word. So while I was going to work every day, thinking I was married to someone who loved me, she was actually researching how to kill my mother. David. No, let me finish. While she was asking me about your health insurance policies, I thought she was being responsible, thinking about our future. But she was actually calculating how much money she'd get when you died. I know this is hard to accept. Hard to accept? David's voice cracked. Mom, I've been sleeping next to a potential murderer for months. I've been telling her I love her while she's been planning to kill you. How am I supposed to accept that? I could hear him crying, and it broke my heart. My son was going to carry this guilt for the rest of his life, even though Elena's actions weren't his fault. David, you couldn't have known. Couldn't I? I keep thinking about the past few months, about things Elena said and did that seemed strange at the time but make perfect sense now. Like what? Like her sudden interest in your health. She'd ask how you were feeling, whether you'd been to the doctor lately, if you had any symptoms of kidney problems or liver disease. My blood ran cold. Ethylene glycol poisoning caused kidney failure. She was checking to see if you were already sick. David continued. She wanted to know if there were any pre-existing conditions that would make a slow poisoning death seem natural. David, you can't blame yourself for not recognizing that as suspicious. Those seem like normal questions from a concerned daughter-in-law. Do they? Because looking back, Elena never showed much concern for anyone's health before. She barely visited when Dad's sister was in the hospital last year. She didn't even send flowers when your neighbor Mrs. Peterson died. I thought about this. David was right. Elena had never been particularly compassionate or caring toward others. Her sudden interest in my health should have been a red flag. There were other things too, David said. She started asking about our family history, about what diseases run in our family, about how long people typically live. She said she was curious about genetics, about what our future children might inherit. Future children? We've been trying to get pregnant for the past 6 months. Elena's been talking about wanting to start a family, about needing a bigger house, about all these plans for our future. David's voice turned bitter. But apparently our future depended on your death. The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. Elena had been planning to have children with David while simultaneously planning to murder their grandmother. She'd been calculating not just her inheritance, but the inheritance her future children would receive. David, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. What? In all the months Elena was planning this, did she ever seem different to you? More stressed, more secretive, more anything? David was quiet for a long time. She seemed focused, like she had a project she was working on, something important that she couldn't talk about. She'd spend hours on her computer, researching things she said were for work. She'd make phone calls in the other room, hang up when I walked in. Did you ask her about it? A few times. She always had explanations. Work projects, planning surprises for birthdays or holidays, researching investments or insurance policies. Everything sounded reasonable. Because you trusted her. Because I loved her. Because I wanted to believe that my wife was planning good things, not— David's voice broke again. Not murder. David, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Elena's actions are not your fault. You are not responsible for failing to recognize that your wife was planning to commit murder. That's not something any reasonable person would expect to have to watch for. But I should have seen something. I should have known that the woman sharing my bed, eating breakfast with me every morning, talking about having children with me, was capable of such calculated evil. Evil is good at hiding itself, I said quietly. That's what makes it so dangerous. I don't know how to live with this, Mom. I don't know how to go on knowing that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. One day at a time, I said, though I honestly didn't know how any of us were going to get through this. We'll figure it out one day at a time. Later that morning, Miguel called. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been crying for hours. Barbara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Of course, Miguel. Last night, when Elena knocked that glass out of my hand, if I weren't her father, do you think she would have stopped me? The question hit me like a punch to the stomach, because I'd been wondering the same thing. I don't know, Miguel. I think I do know, he said quietly. I think Elena would have let me die if stopping me meant exposing her plan. The only reason she confessed is because she couldn't bear the thought of killing her own father. Miguel. Which means she really was planning to let you die, Barbara. She really was okay with murdering you as long as it wasn't someone she personally cared about. I closed my eyes, feeling the full weight of Elena's betrayal settle on my chest. Yes, I said. I think you're right. How do I live with that? How do I live knowing that my daughter, the little girl I raised to be kind and compassionate, became someone who could plan another person's death for money? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how to live knowing my daughter-in-law tried to murder me. Miguel was quiet for a long time. I could hear him breathing, could imagine him sitting in his empty house, trying to process the fact that his daughter was now a confessed would-be murderer. I keep thinking about Rosa, he said finally, referring to his late wife, about what she would say if she knew what Elena had done. What do you think she would say? She would be heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken. Rosa always believed that people were fundamentally good, that even when they did terrible things, there was still goodness somewhere inside them. Miguel's voice cracked. But this, I don't know how to find goodness in planning to murder an innocent woman for money. Elena did save your life, I pointed out, though I wasn't sure why I was defending her. After putting it in danger in the first place, and only because I'm her father, because she loves me. That doesn't make her good, Barbara. That just makes her selfish. Selectively compassionate, I said, remembering David's words from the night before. Exactly. Elena draws the line at hurting people she personally cares about. But everyone else is expendable if the price is right. The phrase, everyone else is expendable, hit me like a physical blow, because it summed up exactly how Elena had seen me. Not as a person with my own right to life, but as an obstacle to her financial security. Miguel, are you going to visit her in jail? I don't know. Part of me wants to look her in the eye and ask her how she became someone I don't recognize. But another part of me is afraid of what I might see there. What do you mean? I'm afraid I'll see the Elena I raised, the sweet little girl who used to bake cookies with her mother and cry when she accidentally stepped on a bug. If I see that Elena, I might forgive her. And I don't think I should forgive someone who tried to commit murder. I understood that. Forgiveness felt like betrayal of myself, of David, of the fundamental principle that human life has value. Or worse, Miguel continued, I'm afraid I'll look at her and see a stranger, someone cold and calculating who I never really knew at all. If that's what I see, then I'll have to accept that my daughter died a long time ago, and I just didn't notice. Miguel, I'm going to visit her, he said suddenly, like he'd just made the decision. Today, I need to know which version of Elena is sitting in that jail cell. Are you sure you're ready for that? I don't think anyone's ever ready to confront their child about attempted murder. But I have to try. I have to understand how the little girl who used to cry at sad movies became someone who could plan to kill you without losing sleep over it. After Miguel hung up, I sat in my kitchen thinking about the different versions of Elena we'd all known. The charming daughter-in-law who brought expensive wine for birthdays. The desperate woman who researched the perfect murder for months. The panicked confessor who saved her father's life by destroying her own. Which one was the real Elena? Or were they all real, different facets of a person who was more complex and more dangerous than any of us had realized? I thought about David, trying to reconcile the woman he'd married with the woman who'd confessed to attempted murder. I thought about Miguel, preparing to visit a daughter who might be a stranger. And I thought about myself, trying to figure out how to live in a world where someone I'd welcomed into my family had spent months planning my death while sitting at my kitchen table, drinking my coffee, and pretending to care about my well-being. The trust that had been broken would never be fully repaired. But maybe that was okay. Maybe a little suspicion, a little caution, a little less naive faith in the goodness of family members wasn't such a bad thing. After all, it might keep me alive. Detective Martinez called that afternoon to tell us that Elena had been formally charged with attempted murder in the first degree. What does that mean exactly? I asked. It means the district attorney's office believes they can prove that your daughter-in-law planned this crime in advance, with premeditation and intent to kill. Detective Martinez explained. Given her detailed confession and the evidence we collected from the wine residue, it's a strong case. What kind of sentence would she be looking at? First-degree attempted murder carries a possible sentence of 15 to 25 years, depending on the circumstances and her criminal history. 25 years. Elena was 26 years old. She could spend the rest of her young adulthood in prison for trying to kill me. Mrs. Williams, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. What? Are you prepared to testify against your daughter-in-law if this goes to trial? The question hit me harder than I'd expected. Testifying meant standing up in open court and telling the world that my son's wife had tried to kill me. It meant making this nightmare public, official, permanent. I don't know. Do I have to? Not necessarily. We have her confession from last night, and we have multiple witnesses who heard it. But having victim testimony would strengthen the case significantly. Can I think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. But Mrs. Williams, I want you to understand something. What Elena did wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of poor judgment. She spent months planning this. She researched the perfect poison. She calculated exactly how much to use. She chose a method specifically because it would be hard to detect. I know. She turned your life into a math problem. She reduced you to a dollar amount on a spreadsheet. That level of premeditation, that callous disregard for human life, that deserves consequences. After Detective Martinez hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Elena had planned my birthday party while secretly planning my death, and tried to process what she'd said. Elena had turned my life into a math problem. The phrase echoed in my head. $400,000. That's what Elena had calculated my life was worth. Less than the price of a nice house, less than a luxury car, less than Elena's vision of the comfortable life she thought she deserved. Richard found me there an hour later, staring at the spot where Elena's poisoned wine had sat for 2 days. How are you holding up? He asked, sitting down across from me. Detective Martinez wants me to testify against Elena. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to see her punished for what she did. But another part of me keeps thinking about David, about how this is going to follow him for the rest of his life. David's not responsible for Elena's choices, but he'll suffer for them anyway. His wife will be a convicted felon. People will always wonder if he knew, if he was involved. His career, his reputation, his future relationships, everything will be tainted by this. Richard reached across the table and took my hands. Barbara, Elena made her choice when she put antifreeze in that wine. David didn't make that choice. You didn't make that choice. The only person responsible for the consequences is Elena herself. I know that logically. But emotionally, you're a mother who doesn't want to see her son hurt any more than he already has been. Exactly. But you're also a person who deserves justice, who deserves to see the person who tried to murder her held accountable for that crime. I thought about Elena's face when she'd confessed, the way she'd looked genuinely shocked that Miguel might drink the poisoned wine. I thought about her desperate lunge across the table, her willingness to expose her crime rather than let her father be hurt. I also thought about the months of cold calculation that had gone into her plan. The careful research, the precise selection of poison, the methodical contamination of the wine. The way she'd watched me plan my birthday party, while knowing she'd given me something that would kill me. She would have let me die slowly, I said quietly. She would have watched me get sicker and sicker, and she would have pretended to be concerned, pretended to comfort David as he watched his mother fade away. Yes, and if Miguel had died instead of me last night, she would have had to live with that for the rest of her life. She would have had to look at David every day, knowing she'd killed his grandfather by mistake. Elena saved Miguel's life, Richard said, but only because she loves him. That doesn't make her a good person. It just makes her someone who's capable of selective compassion. Selective compassion, I repeated. She draws the line at hurting people she personally cares about, but everyone else is expendable. Exactly. I made my decision. I'll testify. By the next morning, word had begun to spread through our small community. In a town where everyone knows everyone, it's impossible to keep a secret like attempted murder quiet for long. Richard's sister, Margaret, called at 8 a.m., her voice shaky with shock. "Barbara, I keep thinking about dinner the other night, about watching Elena knock that glass out of Miguel's hand. I thought she was just being clumsy, maybe a little drunk." We all did. But she was saving his life. She was literally saving his life from something she had done. Margaret's voice cracked. "How do you live with that kind of guilt?" "I don't think Elena sees it as guilt," I said. "I think she sees it as bad luck. Like her plan was perfect, except for one unexpected variable. Miguel showing up." "Exactly. If he hadn't been there, if I had opened that wine on a quiet evening with just Richard, I probably would have drunk enough to—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "To die." "Yes." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Barbara, I need to ask you something, and please don't take this the wrong way." "What? Do you think David knew? Do you think there's any chance he was involved?" The question hit me like a slap. "David, my son, involved in planning my murder?" "No," I said firmly. "Absolutely not. David was as shocked as the rest of us. You saw his face when Elena confessed." "I did see his face, and you're right. He looked genuinely horrified, but—" Margaret hesitated. "But he also knew about your insurance policies, your savings, Richard's pension. Elena couldn't have calculated all that without getting information from somewhere." She was right. Elena had known exact amounts, specific details about our financial situation that she could only have learned from David. David gave her that information innocently, I said. Elena told him she was interested in financial planning, in making sure they had adequate insurance coverage. He had no idea she was using it to plan my murder. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I'm sure. David loves me, Margaret. He would never hurt me. People do strange things when money's involved." "Not David, never David." But after Margaret hung up, I found myself thinking about her words. People do strange things when money's involved. Elena certainly had. She'd planned to kill me for $400,000, money that would have gone to David anyway, eventually, when Richard and I died of natural causes. The urgency, the desperation that drove Elena to attempt murder. Where had that come from? My phone rang again. This time it was our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. "Barbara, dear, I heard about what happened. How are you holding up?" Word traveled fast in small towns. I wondered who else would be calling. How many people already knew that my daughter-in-law had tried to poison me? I'm managing, thank you for asking. If you need anything, groceries, errands, someone to talk to, please don't hesitate to call. What Elena did, Mrs. Patterson's voice trailed off. Well, it's just unthinkable. Thank you, that's very kind. I have to ask, though, and please tell me if this is too personal, but did you have any idea, any sense that she might be capable of something like this? It was a question I'd been asking myself since Elena's confession. Had there been signs, warning signals I'd missed or ignored? She was difficult sometimes, I said carefully. A little entitled, maybe, but dangerous, murderous. No, I never saw that coming. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the people we think we know? Yes, I said quietly. It does. After Mrs. Patterson hung up, I realized that this was just the beginning. The phone calls, the questions, the looks from neighbors and friends who would forever see me as the woman whose daughter-in-law tried to poison her. Our family's private tragedy was about to become very public. Richard found me sitting by the phone, staring at it like it was a bomb waiting to go off. More calls? Margaret and Mrs. Patterson. I think everyone's going to want to know the details. What are you going to tell them? The truth, I guess. That Elena tried to kill me. That she confessed to save her father's life. That our family is destroyed. Richard sat down beside me. Barbara, we're not destroyed. We're hurt. We're traumatized. But we're not destroyed. Elena is destroyed. Her life, her future, her relationship with everyone who ever cared about her. That's what's destroyed. And David's life? David will recover. It'll take time, but he'll recover. He's young, he's strong, and he has people who love him. People who will always wonder if he knew about Elena's plan. Some people might wonder, but the people who matter, the people who know David, will never believe he could be involved in something like this. I hoped Richard was right, but I knew that suspicion, once planted, was hard to root out completely. David would carry the shadow of Elena's crime for the rest of his life, whether he deserved to or not. The phone rang again. This time, I let Richard answer it. 3 days after Elena's arrest, Miguel called to tell me he was going to visit her in jail. I need to understand, he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. I need to look my daughter in the eye and ask her how she became someone I don't recognize. Miguel, are you sure you're ready for that conversation? I don't know if anyone's ever ready to ask their child why they tried to commit murder, but I have to try. He called me that evening after the visit, and I could tell immediately that it hadn't gone well. How is she? I asked. Broken, Miguel said simply. She's completely broken, Barbara. She barely looked at me the whole time we talked, just sat there crying and apologizing over and over again. Did she explain why she did it? She tried to. She kept talking about the debt, about how scared she was of losing everything, about how she felt like she had no other choice. Miguel paused, but none of it made sense. She and David have a nice house, good jobs, a comfortable life. Yes, they have some credit card debt, but nothing that would justify this. So what do you think was really going on? I think my daughter has lost touch with reality, Miguel said quietly. I think she got so caught up in wanting things, expensive things, luxury things, that she convinced herself she deserved them more than you deserve to live. The bluntness of his words hit me like a slap. She said something else too, Miguel continued. She said she'd been researching your family's finances for months. She knew exactly how much life insurance you had, how much David would inherit, what Richard's pension benefits would be if you died first. She had it all calculated down to the penny. Jesus! She turned your life into a math problem, Barbara. She reduced you to a dollar amount on a spreadsheet. I thought about Elena sitting in my kitchen just 3 days ago, complimenting my coffee and suggesting I have a birthday party. Had she been calculating my worth even then? Did she ask about me? I asked, not sure I wanted to hear the answer. She asked if you were going to press charges. And what did you tell her? I told her that was your decision to make, and that she had no right to expect mercy from someone she'd tried to murder. How did she react to that? She got angry, Miguel said, and I could hear the surprise in his voice. She said she thought I would understand her desperation, that I would support her. When I told her what she'd done was unforgivable, she accused me of choosing you over my own daughter. Miguel, I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, Barbara. You didn't do anything wrong. My daughter tried to kill you, and when her plan backfired, she had the nerve to expect sympathy from the people she'd tried to hurt. After Miguel hung up, I sat in my living room with Richard, both of us trying to process the fact that Elena apparently felt entitled to our compassion, even after confessing to attempted murder during our family dinner. She's delusional, Richard said. She actually thinks she's the victim in this situation. Maybe that's how she justified it to herself, I said. Maybe she convinced herself that we were the ones being unfair by having money she wanted. $400,000 isn't even that much money, Barbara. It's not worth killing someone over. It is if you think you deserve it more than they do. David filed for divorce the following Monday. He came by our house that evening to tell us about it, looking like he'd lost 20 pounds in the past week. I can't do it, Mom, he said, sitting at our kitchen table where Elena had sat just days earlier planning my death. I can't stay married to someone who tried to kill you. How are you feeling about that decision? I asked. Relieved, mostly, and guilty for feeling relieved. David rubbed his face with his hands. I keep thinking I should be more upset about ending my marriage, but mostly I just feel like I can breathe again. That tells you something, doesn't it? Yeah. It tells me our marriage was probably over long before Elena decided to commit murder. Richard leaned back in his chair. What made you realize that? I've been thinking about the past few months, about how Elena was acting, and I realized she'd been different for a while. More secretive, more demanding, more... David searched for the word. More entitled, I guess. She'd make these comments about how we deserved better, how other people didn't appreciate what they had, how unfair it was that we had to struggle while other people got to be comfortable. Other people like us? Yeah. She'd make little digs about how easy you and Dad had it, how you didn't have to worry about money because you owned your house and had savings. David looked at me with apologetic eyes. I should have shut that down, but I thought she was just venting frustration. She was building up resentment, Richard said, making it easier to justify what she was planning to do. That's what I think, too. She spent months convincing herself that you didn't deserve what you had, that your lives were somehow less valuable than our financial comfort. I thought about Elena's confession, about how she'd said she needed me to die so that she and David could have the life they deserved. David, I said carefully, when you think back on your marriage, do you think Elena ever really loved you? Or was she just using you to get access to what she thought was your inheritance? David was quiet for a long time, considering the question. I think she loved me, he said finally. But I also think she loved the idea of what our life could be more than she loved our actual life. And when reality didn't match her expectations, she decided to do something about it. By killing me. By killing you. David's voice broke a little on the words. Mom, I am so sorry. I brought this person into our family. I married her, I trusted her, I gave her access to information she used to plan your murder. David, you couldn't have known. Couldn't I? Looking back, there were signs. The way she talked about money, the way she researched everything obsessively, the way she'd get these strange looks on her face when she thought no one was watching. David shook his head. I chose not to see it because it was easier than dealing with it. What kinds of strange looks? Cold looks. Calculating looks. Like she was trying to solve a problem or figure out an equation. David shuddered. I caught her staring at you like that once, at Christmas dinner. When I asked her what she was thinking about, she said she was just wondering what it would be like to be your age. The memory sent chills down my spine. Elena had been sitting at our Christmas table, eating food I'd cooked, surrounded by family who loved her, while planning my death. There's something else, David said reluctantly. Something I didn't tell the police because I wasn't sure it was relevant. What? About 2 months ago, Elena asked me about your health history. She said she was curious about genetics, about what kinds of conditions might run in our family. She asked specifically about kidney problems, liver disease, anything that might affect your life expectancy. Richard and I exchanged a look. Ethylene glycol poisoning caused kidney failure. She was researching how to make your murder look natural, Richard said grimly. That's what I think too. She wanted to know what kinds of health problems would seem believable if you suddenly developed them. Jesus Christ, David. Your wife spent months planning the perfect murder. I know. David put his head in his hands. I know. And I have to live with the fact that I was sleeping next to a potential murderer for months without realizing it. She's not a potential murderer, I said quietly. She's an actual murderer who got stopped by accident. Elena's lawyer called us 2 weeks later with an offer. Elena would plead guilty to attempted murder in the second degree in exchange for a 15-year sentence, with the possibility of parole after 10 years. What's the difference between first and second degree? I asked Detective Martinez when she called to discuss it. First degree is premeditated, planned in advance. Second degree is more impulsive, done in the heat of the moment, Detective Martinez explained. Given that your daughter-in-law spent months planning this, we could definitely prove first degree, which carries a heavier sentence. So why are they offering a plea bargain? Because they know they can't win at trial. Her confession is ironclad. The physical evidence is clear, and they have multiple witnesses. They're trying to minimize her sentence any way they can. What would she get if we went to trial and proved first-degree murder? Probably 25 to life. I thought about Elena sitting in her jail cell, probably still believing that she was the victim in this situation, still thinking that her desperation justified attempted murder. What do you think I should do? That's not my decision to make, Mrs. Williams, but I can tell you that plea bargains save everyone a lot of time and emotional trauma. Trials are hard on victims, especially in cases like this where the perpetrator is a family member. Can I think about it? Of course. You have a week to decide. That evening, Richard, David, and I sat around our kitchen table, the same table where Elena had planned my birthday party while secretly planning my death, and discussed whether to accept the plea bargain. I want her to face the full consequences of what she did, Richard said. She planned this for months. She researched the perfect murder. She contaminated that wine, knowing it would kill you slowly and painfully. That's first-degree murder, and she should pay the price for first-degree murder. But a trial means reliving all of this publicly, I pointed out. It means having our family's business spread across the newspapers, having everyone we know find out that David's wife tried to poison me. I don't care about the publicity, David said firmly. I care about justice. Elena tried to commit the perfect murder, and she only got caught because she accidentally put her own father in danger. If Dad hadn't been there that night, if you had drunk that wine like she planned, she would have gotten away with it. You really think she would have gotten away with it? Don't you? She researched ethylene glycol poisoning specifically because it mimics natural causes. If you had gotten sick gradually, if doctors thought it was kidney disease or liver failure, who would have thought to test for poison? Richard nodded grimly. Elena could have been comforting us at your funeral while secretly enjoying her inheritance money. The thought made me feel sick. Elena sitting in the front row at my memorial service, crying crocodile tears while David grieved for his murdered mother. There's another consideration, I said. Miguel. He's already devastated by what Elena did. A long public trial would make this nightmare even worse for him. Miguel wants justice too, David said. I talked to him yesterday. He said he'd rather see Elena face the full consequences of her actions than let her get away with a lighter sentence just to spare his feelings. What did he say exactly? He said Elena made her choice when she put antifreeze in that wine. He said the consequences are hers to face, not his to minimize. I thought about Miguel raising that poisoned wine to his lips, about Elena lunging forward to save her father's life at the cost of exposing her own crime. She saved his life, I said quietly, after putting him in danger in the first place, Richard pointed out. She's not a hero for stopping something she caused. I know that. But she did choose to save him, even though it meant confessing to attempted murder. Because he's her father, David said. She saved him because she loves him. That doesn't make her a good person, Mom. It just makes her someone who's capable of selective compassion. Selective compassion? She was willing to let you die slowly and painfully for money, but she couldn't let her father take a sip of poisoned wine by accident. She draws the line at hurting people she personally cares about, but everyone else is expendable. The phrase, "everyone else is expendable," hit me like a physical blow, because it summed up exactly how Elena had seen me. Not as a person with my own right to life, but as an obstacle to her financial security. "I want to go to trial," I said finally. "Are you sure?" Richard asked. "I'm sure. Elena spent months planning the perfect murder. She reserves the sentence for planning the perfect murder." Elena's trial began 4 months later, on a gray November morning that matched my mood perfectly. The courthouse was busier than I'd expected. Apparently, attempted murder cases involving family members drew more attention than I'd anticipated. David sat between Richard and me in the front row of the gallery, wearing the same black suit he'd worn to his wedding 4 years earlier. On the other side of the aisle, Miguel sat alone, looking like he'd aged a decade since that terrible dinner party. Elena looked different in her orange jail jumpsuit. Smaller, somehow diminished. Her perfect hair had grown out and was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger than her 26 years and more fragile, but I tried not to let that influence how I felt about what she'd done. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Elena's internet search history, showing months of research into inheritance laws, ethylene glycol poisoning, and methods of murder that could look like natural causes. Her purchase of antifreeze from AutoZone, captured on security cameras. The wine bottle with traces of ethylene glycol. Her detailed confession to police. This was not a crime of passion, the prosecutor told the jury. This was not a moment of poor judgment or temporary insanity. This was a carefully calculated, thoroughly researched, methodically planned attempt to commit the perfect murder. The defendant only confessed when her own father was about to accidentally consume the poison she had prepared for her mother-in-law. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the witness stand on shaky legs and swore to tell the truth. "Mrs. Williams," the prosecutor said, "can you tell the court about the wine your daughter-in-law gave you for your birthday?" I told the story I'd now told dozens of times. Elena's early morning visit with the expensive gift, her insistence that I save it for a special occasion, the birthday dinner where everything changed. "What happened when your father-in-law, Miguel Vargas, prepared to drink the wine?" Elena lunged forward and knocked the glass out of his hand, I said, looking directly at Elena as I spoke. She shouted, "Dad, no!" And when the glass shattered, we all demanded to know what was wrong. That's when she broke down and confessed that she had put antifreeze in the wine. "How did you feel when you learned that the wine was poisoned?" I took a deep breath. Betrayed. Horrified. I realized that Elena had spent months planning to kill me, that she'd researched the perfect method, that she'd given me that wine with a smile while knowing it would cause me to die slowly and painfully. Did the defendant show any remorse for her actions? "She showed remorse for putting her father in danger," I said carefully. "She was devastated that her mistake could have killed him. But I'm not sure she showed genuine remorse for planning my murder. She seemed more upset about getting caught than about what she'd done." Elena's defense attorney, a middle-aged man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, tried to paint a picture of a desperate young woman who'd made a terrible mistake under financial pressure. "Mrs. Williams," he said during cross-examination, "isn't it true that my client confessed to this crime voluntarily? She could have let you think the wine was fine, but she chose to reveal the truth to save an innocent life." "She revealed the truth to save her father's life," I corrected. "If her father hadn't been there, if I had drunk that wine as she intended, she would never have confessed." "You don't know that, don't I? She watched me serve that wine. She watched everyone raise their glasses to toast my birthday. She only spoke up when someone she personally cared about was in danger. The defense attorney tried several more approaches, but nothing stuck. Elena's guilt was too obvious, her planning too thorough, her confession too detailed. Elena herself took the stand on the 4th day of trial. She looked tiny in the witness box, and her voice was so quiet the judge had to ask her to speak up several times. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was just so scared about our financial situation, so desperate for a solution. I wasn't thinking clearly." "How long did you research methods of poisoning?" the prosecutor asked. "About 6 weeks." "And during those 6 weeks, did you ever consider asking for help with your financial problems instead of planning to commit murder?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. I didn't think anyone would understand." "Understand what?" "How desperate I was. How scared I was of losing everything." "So you decided to take someone else's life instead?" "I decided to solve the problem. By committing murder. Yes." The prosecutor walked Elena through her entire plan. The research, the purchase of antifreeze, the contamination of the wine, the careful selection of a poison that would mimic natural causes. "Miss Vargas, at any point during this months-long planning process, did you consider that Barbara Williams was a human being with her own right to life?" Elena looked at me across the courtroom, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been understanding in her eyes. "I tried not to think about that," she said quietly. "It was easier to think about the money than to think about her." "Easier to think about her as an obstacle to your financial security than as a person?" "Yes." "And when you gave her the poisoned wine for her birthday, what were you thinking?" "I was thinking that it would all be over soon, that she would get sick gradually, that it would look natural, that David would inherit the money and our problems would be solved. Were you thinking about the pain she would experience as the poison slowly destroyed her kidneys?" Elena started crying harder. "I tried not to think about that either. But you knew she would suffer." Yes, I knew. "And you decided that her suffering was acceptable if it meant you could pay off your credit cards." Elena's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The jury had heard Elena admit that she'd knowingly planned to cause me agonizing pain and death for financial gain. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. "We find the defendant guilty of attempted murder in the 1st degree." Elena's knees buckled when she heard the verdict. Miguel, sitting across the aisle from us, put his head in his hands. David reached over and squeezed my hand. Justice, I thought. Finally, justice. 2 weeks later, we returned to court for Elena's sentencing. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, had reviewed all the evidence and was ready to make her decision. "Miss Vargas," the judge said, "you have been convicted of the attempted murder of Barbara Williams, a crime that involved months of premeditation, extensive research, and callous disregard for human life. Before I impose sentence, do you have anything to say?" Elena stood slowly, her hands shaking. "Your Honor," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I want to apologize to Mrs. Williams, to her family, and to my own family for the terrible thing I did. I was desperate and scared, and I made the worst possible choice. I know there's no excuse for what I did, no justification for planning to take someone's life. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She looked at me then, across the crowded courtroom, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Genuine understanding of what she'd done, genuine remorse for the pain she'd caused. It was too late for her remorse to change anything, but it was something. "Mrs. Williams," the judge said, "would you like to make a victim impact statement?" I stood up slowly, my prepared speech forgotten. Looking at Elena's tear-stained face, I found myself speaking from the heart instead. "Elena," I said, "you took something from me that I can never get back, my sense of safety in my own family. You made me question every gift, every kind gesture, every expression of love, wondering what hidden motives might be lurking beneath the surface." Elena was crying harder now, but she maintained eye contact. "But you also taught me something," I continued. "You taught me how precious life is, how fragile trust is, and how important it is to appreciate the people who genuinely love us. You tried to destroy my family, but in the end, you only made us stronger." I sat back down, feeling drained, but somehow lighter. "Miss Vargas," the judge said, "this court sentences you to 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. I want you to understand that you came very close to committing the perfect murder. If your father hadn't been present that night, if your conscience hadn't compelled you to save his life, Barbara Williams would likely be dead today, and you would have gotten away with it." Elena nodded, tears streaming down her face. "The only reason you're not facing a life sentence is because you ultimately chose to save an innocent life, even at the cost of exposing your own crime. That shows me that you're capable of making moral choices when the stakes are high enough. I hope you'll spend the next 20 years learning to make those choices consistently." As they led Elena away in handcuffs, she looked back at us one more time. Her eyes found Miguel first, her father, the man she'd saved by confessing to attempted murder. Then they found David, her soon-to-be ex-husband, the man whose inheritance she'd tried to steal by killing his mother. Finally, they found me. "I'm sorry," she mouthed. I nodded, not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement. She was sorry, finally and truly sorry, but sorry couldn't undo the months of planning, couldn't erase the betrayal, couldn't restore the trust she'd shattered. Sometimes sorry is too little, too late. 2 years have passed since Elena was sentenced. David has moved on with his life in ways I never expected. He sold the house he'd shared with Elena, paid off their remaining debts with the proceeds, and moved to a different city for a fresh start. He's dating now, a teacher named Sarah, who makes him laugh in a way I hadn't seen in years. She's nothing like Elena, David told me during his last visit. She's honest, direct, uncomplicated. When she has a problem, she talks about it instead of plotting to murder people. That's a low bar for a relationship, Richard joked. Yeah, well, I've learned to appreciate the basics. Miguel visits us occasionally, usually on holidays or special occasions. Elena's imprisonment aged him tremendously, but he's slowly learning to separate the daughter he raised from the woman she became. "I still love her," he told me recently, "but I don't like her very much anymore, and I don't trust her at all." Elena writes to him sometimes from prison, long letters about her therapy sessions, her work in the prison library, her slowly dawning understanding of what she'd done and why. Miguel reads them but doesn't respond. "She wants forgiveness," he said. "But forgiveness isn't something you can demand from people you've tried to kill. Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" Miguel considered the question carefully. "Maybe someday, when I'm sure she understands not just that what she did was wrong, but why it was wrong. Right now, I think she's sorry she got caught more than she's sorry she tried to kill you. Richard and I have had to rebuild our sense of safety and trust. We don't entertain as much as we used to. The dining room where Elena confessed still feels cursed somehow. We've replaced all our wine glasses and we both still check expiration dates obsessively on everything we eat and drink. But we're alive. We're together. We survived. The hardest part hasn't been dealing with Elena's betrayal, but dealing with the knowledge of how close she came to succeeding. If Miguel hadn't shown up unexpectedly that night, if he hadn't been excited about trying good Chianti, if Elena had been able to stomach watching her father drink poison, I would be dead and Elena would be rich. That thought haunts me sometimes, especially on quiet Tuesday mornings when I'm making coffee and the light is streaming through my yellow curtains. I think about alternate timelines where Elena's plan worked, where I died slowly and painfully, while she comforted my grieving family and secretly calculated her windfall. But then I remember Miguel's desperate lunge across the dinner table, Elena's panicked confession, the moment when her love for her father proved stronger than her greed. Evil revealed itself that night, but so did love. The two forces collided at our dining room table, and love won. Sometimes that's enough. If you take anything from this story, let it be this. Pay attention to the people who has too many questions about your finances. Pay attention to family members who seem more interested in your assets than your well-being. Pay attention to gifts that seem too expensive, generosity that feels calculated, concern that comes with an agenda. Eleanor almost succeeded because she was patient, careful, and smart. She researched the perfect crime, chose the perfect poison, selected the perfect victim. But she also almost succeeded because the people around her, David, Miguel, Richard, and I, didn't want to believe that someone we loved could be planning something so horrific. We ignored warning signs because we chose love over suspicion, trust over caution. In most cases, that's the right choice, but not always. Trust your instincts. Ask uncomfortable questions. Don't let family ties prevent you from protecting yourself from family members. And if someone gives you wine for your birthday, maybe let someone else try it first. I'm only half joking about that last part. The truth is, most people are good. Most gifts are genuine. Most family dinners are safe, but not all of them. Eleanor taught me that even people who love you, or think they love you, are capable of viewing your life as expendable if the price is right. She taught me that greed can masquerade as desperation, that calculated cruelty can hide behind financial fear. But she also taught me, inadvertently, about the power of selective love. When push came to shove, when her carefully laid plans put her father in danger, she chose his life over her freedom. That choice, desperate, last minute, and entirely selfish, ended up saving my life too. Evil and love, it turns out, can coexist in the same heart. Understanding that paradox doesn't make Elena's crime less horrific, but it does make her more human. And somehow, that makes what she did even more terrifying. Because if Elena, charming, intelligent, seemingly normal Elena, could spend months planning the perfect murder, then anyone could. That's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life, however long or short that life may be.